Muted.
Yes, I think it's important that you understand what the products are out there and what your client might need. We're very excited about this new tool, and we all know that wellness programs are becoming very important as benefits to your clients. Knowledge is power, and it's important to our survival. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Patrick, and thank you very much for hosting this webinar for us today.
Absolutely, Ronell. Thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of it. And thanks everyone out there that's joining or listening along later. A few housekeeping items for the webinar today. Today's webinar is being recorded. So if anyone's uncomfortable with that, you can exit the webinar, but we will have it available for replay. And a few other housekeeping items. I've got all the participants right now muted. Towards the end, I will open that up and we can have a little bit of Q&A. Anywhere along the way, though, that you'd like to maybe inject a question into the presentation, feel free to use the chat window, and I'll try to keep an eye on that as we go and can address that perhaps along the way or at the Q&A at the end. As Ronell mentioned, my name is JP Bewley. I'm the CEO and founder of one of the founders of BCA. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and a little bit more about BCA as we go, but what I'm going to focus on today is a trend that we've been seeing over the last 3 years or so around the digitization of the insurance customer that has health and wellness applications both for life insurance, health insurance, but also employer and group settings, and I'll try to bring some of this to life for you as we go. What I've got laid out from an agenda perspective today, we've got about an hour together overall. I thought I'd do just 5 minutes kind of about my background as well as kind of the company's focus. Spend a little bit more time on the state of the industry overall, kind of what's happening in employee wellness programs, what's happening in insurance, and how digitization and wearables are changing that, and kind of how I think that perhaps you can take advantage of some of these shifting sands in the marketplace. Talk to you about what some of the top use cases are that we're seeing insurers and employers focus on. Do a little bit of a demonstration about the types of data and the types of insight that can be generated off of these types of programs. Talk to you a little bit about what the typical design of the insurance product, if you will, looks like. Talk to you a little bit about what the rewards programs are looking like, because we're seeing some trends emerge in how employers, how insurers, and others are actually incenting people for participation in these per member per month type programs. And then kind of wrap up with what's next, kind of a look out on the landscape from a devices perspective, you know, what new technologies come into market, what new analytics are coming to market, and then Q&A. That's kind of what I've got laid out for us today. Introduce myself. So this will make a little bit more sense in a minute why I would start out this way. But you know, as I previously said, my name's JP Bewley. Folks call me JP. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia area. 39 years old, father of 2 boys. Pretty well been an entrepreneur and data science type of entrepreneur my entire career. About 5'9" and 187 pounds, not a smoker, no real previous medical history, pretty good credit risk, trail runner, pretty solid resting heart rate, and in general, pretty good biometrics. And there's only one problem with this picture, and that problem is that this was actually me in 2015 when I was underwritten by my insurer, or when I joined my employee wellness plan, or when I signed up for a rewards program. Actually, today, as I sit here and talk to you, I'm a year older. I'm still a father of 2 boys and still an entrepreneur, but I spend a lot of time on webinars and even more time on airplanes, flying around the globe, deploying these programs. And as a result, I've gained a bit of weight. So I'm up to about 199 pounds now. And that actually may be a little bit generous. I may be closer to 201. Still not smoking. Still no real previous medical history, but my level of activity has come way down. and I'm kind of getting into that mildly sedentary category. And I'm not getting a lot of sleep because of hopping time zones and just, as we all do, in and out of conference calls and those types of things. And it's really starting to show up in things like my recovery heart rate. It's really starting to show up in my resting heart rate while sleeping. And what I was very disappointed to find out during one of these demos, where I was actually demoing some real technology, a Bluetooth blood pressure cuff, I discovered that I was occasionally getting measures that were pre-hypertensive. And it was kind of a big wake-up call and kind of a scare moment for me. And I think this picture of me, and I'll show you some more data a little bit later, but I think this picture of me and my evolving biometrics in a relatively short period of time really represent the challenge and the opportunity for employee wellness, for insurance, and for chronic disease management today, is that there exists a technology today for always-on continuous monitoring. And most of the business models are based off of yesterday's technology and yesterday's method of collecting information about a consumer. And so there's a real disruptive opportunity that we're faced with. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to talk to you about how real that opportunity is and how quickly it's going to happen, and then kind of what to do about it as we go through. So just a slide or so about BCA. So we're a 3.5-year-old organization now. We're big data and customer engagement experts. It's really our background. We came from the world's largest consumer data company, as well as one of my co-founders is the world's leading data scientist in the field of customer engagement. So a lot of really, really great math and a lot of really great data experience. And at the end of the day, what we do is we make wearables easy. So we've got an end-to-end solution for life and health insurers that handles everything from the initial invitation all the way through advanced analytics and data collection to end-user support. We're based here in Atlanta. And it's been an interesting journey for an early-stage company. We're globally deployed and we've done data collection on human beings now in 29 different countries around the globe. We launched first commercially in Australia, and then Western Europe, Asia, Latin America, and then the United States really just kind of started catching on to the trend, I would say, over the last 9 months or so. We're doing a lot of data collection in a very safe, secure, privacy-assured way to make sure that we help organizations stay within the guardrails of things like HIPAA and things. We've also started to create quite a bit of global buzz. So we were the IDC Innovation Award winner this year for the most innovative use of big data in the financial services insurance industry. And we've kind of got a rich history of innovating and being a thought leader. What I'm going to talk to you about later today is a little bit of the how. And the how is based off of a platform we've built that we call Covalence, and it's really kind of built from the ground up to make instrumenting populations of people pretty quick and pretty easy. And it does some pretty cool things. One of the cool things that it does is we can uniquely fingerprint a user. So we can basically identify you as a unique human being off of your Fitbit. And I make the joke sometimes that your Fitbit is telling on you. If you will. We can infer things like age and gender and body mass index off the device. And my other joke there is, does my data make me look fat? Because we can catch things like misdisclosures in height and weight, where someone's body mass index is a lot higher than they're reporting it to be, just off of your standard consumer grade Fitbit. And we support a lot of different devices out there in market today. Fitbit, Garmin, Apple Health Kit, and we have a platform that's available in both English and Spanish, and looks like soon some of the Asian languages as well. I talked to you a little bit about bioidentity, but what's really neat about that is, again, it is a way for an insurer to understand that someone has taken the Fitbit off and given it to a different person. That's really important from an insurance perspective. It's less important from an employer perspective, and a lot of our employee wellness deployments are double-blind and anonymous. And so what that means is the employer doesn't know that JP didn't go to bed until 3 a.m. last night. They know that on average, 40-year-old males behave in this way, but we protect the individual participant's identity and keep the reporting at a level above, which is an important feature in employee wellness. Industries that have adopted this and that we serve, life insurance, health insurance, clinical research, senior living and aged care, employee wellness, as well as hospital systems. Insurers are really focused on things like customer engagement and better segmentation and targeting. Employers really, especially in the large group setting, seem to be focused on things like chronic population management. So not my 70,000 employees in group, but my 3,000 employees that have comorbidities of COPD, diabetes, heart disease, and they want some sort of specialized care program because that's where the bulk of their costs resides. So a little bit about state of the industry. What's, I think, fascinating to a lot of people is the fact that while some of this seems very futuristic, it's very real and very here today, and there's a big deluge that's literally we're on the precipice of. So, but healthcare, especially within the United States, with the Affordable Care Act, has changed in some pretty major ways, and individuals are really focused on this whole notion of consumerization of healthcare. They want their healthcare to be like a lot of other things in their life, and much more of a retail experience where they have a lot more choice and flexibility. But they're also interested in coaching and help on how to get and stay healthy. And so we're seeing insurers really kind of start to step into that role and begin to offer some level of wellness proposition. The payers themselves are looking to improve customer engagement, and that's probably the #1 use case that we see right now. Is customer retention. They ultimately want to lower claims utilization as well, but I think everybody generally believes that that's kind of 18 to 24 months out. And employers are looking for healthier employers, higher productivity, lower per member per month cost, reduced absenteeism, maybe reduced specialty claims like mental health claims and some of those types of things. So this is, kind of from 3 different perspectives at a high level, some of the major trends that that really seem to be influencing the marketplace. The wearables, though, not only are they here today, they're here to stay, and they're here to really explode in a big way on a forward-going basis. If you focus on the top left chart up here from Tractica, what's really fascinating about this is while there are hundreds of thousands to millions of units deployed for Fitbit and Garmin and Apple Watch devices, we're really just at the beginning of an explosion of wearable devices. If you look there at 2016, it almost doesn't even register on the chart. It's almost doubling year on year from 2016 to 2017. And when you look a mere 5 years out to 2021 there, we're looking at almost a 15, 16-fold increase in the number of units in market, which is just absolutely staggering from a wearables deployment perspective, as well as from a data generation and growth. And I'll talk a little bit more about the data that comes off of these devices in just a moment. What's really fascinating is most of the charts and most of the research companies are forecasting that this is a battle for the wrist, meaning it's kind of replacing the traditional watch and the traditional smartwatch. I actually differ a little bit from an opinion perspective with that. I think that is probably where the majority of the growth goes. But I run into a lot of plan participants that really still like their other watch, and they really kind of want to keep wearing their other watch, and they're looking for ways to participate in programs that are much more passive and pervasive and behind the scenes. And so we're seeing everything from wearable patches that biometric collect this data to earrings and jewelry that collect this data. So they are very much becoming lifestyle pieces, but they're also becoming invisible. And it's not really hard to imagine that 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, every single thing that you interact with has a sensor in it of some sort, from shirts to shoes to other everyday products that can generate this type of data. So I actually think that while there is a battle for the wrist going on, we're going to see a lot of other methods for people to participate in these programs, including the Apple or Android device that they run around with in their pocket every day that's called a smartphone. And I actually think that that will be one of the predominant data collection methods for participation in employee wellness programs. Payers believe that this is going to have a really big impact on the industry. About 2/3 of payers believe that it's going to significantly change their industry. 1/3 say that they're already using wearables to engage consumers and employees. I think that's an overestimation. 50% claim to see a positive return on their investments. I think that is also a little bit optimistic, but I actually think that 2 years from now that number is going to be significantly higher. And about 3/4 say that they're providing some level of personalized experience, and this comes from 445 global insurance industry executives. Consumers are exploding in the number of health and wellness apps that they're using. They, interestingly enough, are very willing to share their data. They are more willing to share their data with doctors than anybody else, but what's fascinating is almost 2/3 say that they would share their data with their health plan, while only 1/3 say that they would share their data with their employer. And so you can kind of start to see the emerging role that insurers have in this mix for providing the wellness program. You know, the diet and nutrition is a pretty big use from an app perspective, but what I will say is the diet and nutrition apps right now have a long way to go. It's really hard to get data into things like MyFitnessPal about that cheeseburger that you just ate, and I think that there's some innovation that will happen there over the next few years. And this comes from a survey of in consumers across 7 different countries represented by United States, Australia, Brazil, England, some of the Nordics, and Middle East and Asia. From our perspective, this is absolutely happening today. We've been working with insurers and employers now for really the last 1.5 years on the deployment of wearables and connected health devices. Many insurers are already in pilot or framing up their pilots. Some have already commercially launched with wearables as a key part of their offering. The insurers that have deployed are building very deep knowledge bases of new types of data, and many of these devices generate 50, 60, 70,000 data points per day per person. So it is a massive amount of data that needs to be wrangled. And these insurers, as well as the employers themselves, are having to make cultural and product changes to embrace this new technology. And so it's very disruptive within the insurers and the employers themselves, and they really have to kind of think about new ways of operations because of this data. And it's moving fast, right? From a pilot to commercial launch is averaging about 10 months, which seems to me a breakneck speed, having worked in the insurance industry for about 1.5 decades. That seems lightning fast for an insurer to move, but that's what we're seeing. There's a lot of buzz and media coverage. I think these slides will be available later, and you can watch some of these videos yourself, but there's been a lot of positive PR. Despite some of the privacy concerns, consumers are still very much willing to participate in these programs because they see the benefit to themselves on living healthier and healthier lifestyles and getting coaching and feedback on their wellness, and also being rewarded for the choices and habits that they're forming. What we believe that insurers or employers are missing out on if they don't move forward quickly are key customer engagement and differentiation, you know, employee engagement, benefits opportunities. They're missing out on massive data sets that they can use to renegotiate their rates with insurers, and key learnings and cultural change that end up resulting in happier, more engaged employees that just generally have an overall sense that the organization cares about them and is trying to make a positive difference. And there's quite a bit of goodwill that seems to emerge from these programs in an employee setting. When we talk about the data, I kind of like to use the term Internet of People instead of the Internet of Things, because these things are just things on people that generate data. But what's really fascinating about that is the amount of data that's generated. So 1,000 people over a course of 30 days using a consumer-grade wearable like a Fitbit or a Garmin device will generate 3.3 billion heartbeats. That's an amazing amount of heartbeats to be analyzed in a very short period of time on a very small number of people. Most of the medical research that you see published on things like resting heart rate or heart rate by time of day, or on cohorts of people that are 100, 200 people over a period of 10, 15, 20 days, and they're publishing peer-reviewed medical papers based on that amount of data collection. And the size and scale here of data is just significantly beyond the size and scale of data that's been available in clinical research to date. And that's going to change things like predictive models and intervention models in ways that we can't even imagine today. That same 1,000 people in 30 days will walk about 180 million steps. They'll sleep about 13.3 million sleep minutes. They will exercise about 130,000 times. And that's being a little bit generous, because the average duration of an exercise event is going to be about 15 to 18 minutes. And most of the time it's a walk that's below the cardiovascular threshold that would make it heart healthy. So generally populations are pretty sedentary, to kind of put a fine point on that. You'll observe about 14,000 cardiovascular recovery heart rate events, which is a good way to measure how efficient somebody's heart is. You can think about this as walking up a hill and stopping at the top of the hill to enjoy the view, and for the next 120 seconds measuring how the heart recovers. And what's fascinating about that is, with a consumer grade wearable device that's sampling heart rate 32 times a second and writing that data to the cloud every 60 seconds, you can assess heart health in an individual's life sometimes multiple times a day, in a very similar way that an insurer might do once a year by putting them on a treadmill hooked to an EKG. And so it's really, really revolutionizing the level of insight into people's overall fitness. As well as about 7,000 stress events, which is fascinating when you start to look at time of day, day of week patterns on stress events. So it is a massive amount of data in a very short period of time on very few people that are generated from these programs. The use cases in the insurance industry really bucket into three big categories: improved customer engagement, better segmentation and targeting of the employee base, and better evaluation of pricing and risk, so that you can put special care programs in place. We're seeing insurers move to dynamic premiums that are repriced based off of behaviors, so not just medical underwriting, especially since medical underwriting has really kind of went away with the Affordable Care Act. The migration to continuous monitoring behavioral programs seem to be the new underwriting and actuary trend. Digging into those a little bit deeper in the improved customer engagement, the big challenge that insurers are facing is this notion of high lapse rates, customers that are highly engaged during the underwriting process, but not that much after that, and they send a check once a month or once a quarter, or their employer does on their behalf. So there's very little connectivity to the program or the brand. And by providing these programs that have data collection that's always on, you can be highly personalized. You can give the customer, the employee, a reason to log in several times a week. You can enable a reward scheme that incents them for exhibiting healthy behaviors, and you can provide coaching along the way to help guide them to better sleep, better activity, more cardiovascular efficient activity. The segmentation and targeting, insurers are really trying to understand how to think about their customers other than 40-year-old males that live in this region. They really want to understand the behavioral characteristics and be able to have an engagement and a conversation with those individuals that match up to their lifestyle and the choices they're making in their lifestyle. And I think that's the same from an employer perspective. If you have an employee base that has a high population of cyclists, you probably want to have some level of cycling program that can align with those people's interests, or yoga. And so we see this as a way to kind of measure specialized benefits programs and help employers rebalance their investments between different specialized benefits programs to better line up with the choices that their populations of people are actually making. And then lastly, the opportunity to better price and assess risk through longer term longitudinal monitoring is a real key opportunity. And I think it's a little bit longer term out than the other two, but it's moving pretty quick. And in other regions around the world, we're actually implementing these today. I think the U.S. Will lag behind that for a couple of years is kind of my sense. So, what does this data look like underneath the hood, and kind of what sort of insight and sense can you make out of it, and then how does that translate into an employee chronic disease management type of program? So that's kind of what I wanted to get into here and give you a bit of a sense of. As I mentioned, there are certain areas of data that you collect very, very quickly, things like heart rate observations. But there are other data that builds slower and you need to observe for a longer period of time, things like stress scores, things like recovery heart rate scores. And so not all data is created equal and not all data accumulates at the same rate. And heart rate is one of the fastest accumulating data points, whereas stress and recovery heart rate accumulate at a much slower rate. But to give you a feel here, and I'm trying to, sorry, I had a couple of slides that are not showing up here, but I'll pull those up for you. But in just a moment. But digging into how this data is used, I think from a program design perspective, one of the things that is a pretty important theme is the notion of keep it simple, right? And so what we're seeing organizations do is to start to bucket or stratify their risk, right? So how do I quickly, in my population of employees, assess cardiovascular risk? And just give it a red light, yellow light, green light kind of indication, and in a very non-invasive way. So how do I group employees into very, very low risk, into moderate risk? And one of the terms that I've heard used from benefits coordinators in the past is this notion of the pre-sick. And so it's your emerging sick. They're not necessarily sick today. You're not seeing it show up in your claims utilization, but it's coming. So how do you quantify that? And so this is a red light, yellow light, green light approach to cardiovascular monitoring, where on just a few simple measures, things like a wearable device that also has heart rate, to be able to look at things like resting heart rate and recovery heart rate and activity levels, and a 2 or 3 question survey, and be able to say, based on the fact that your resting heart rate's below 85 beats a minute and your recovery heart rate score is greater than 35, and on average you're getting about 30 minutes worth of vigorous activity a day, and the way that you've answered these 2 or 3 questions, there's not a lot of risk here. Keep up what you're doing. No specialized program. Whereas in the middle category here, if we're seeing a moderate to heavily sedentary set of behaviors that are persisting for a long period of time, it starts to manifest itself in higher resting heart rates. It starts to manifest itself in lower recovery heart rate scores. And you can kind of start to put that into the yellow light category, which means that you can have a specialized program that will allow you to address that particular population, and maybe you surround them with a health advocate. So one of the big trends that we see is pairing our solution with a health coaching or health advocate program, where there is a health coach or a health app that is focused on a segment of your population, the 2,000 to 3,000 kind of pre-sick or emerging sick, if you will. And then the very, very acute scores for heart rate and recovery heart rate and highly sedentary behaviors typically are already manifesting themselves in claims for things like heart disease, diabetes, COPD, and then oftentimes some level of comorbidities. And so this is a way to, you've probably already got coaching programs in place for those types of individuals, and this is a way to provide additional data to their health advocates that help personalize the program and give them feedback on whether they're actually following the prescribed program that the health advocates put out there. You know, if they're trying to get them more active, they're trying to get them involved in some sort of activity a couple of times a week, this is a good way to assess that and see if they're actually following what's been laid out there for them. A little bit of, give me just a moment here. My screen share went a little haywire on me, but I've got it back now. Same thing for diabetes management. And this one, in some parts of the world, there's a very strong trend, kind of Middle East as well as Latin America, for government-mandated diabetes programs, and kind of similar type of approach of looking at some level of activity off of a wearable device compared with some level of BMI calculation and a health survey to do a red light, yellow light, green light risk stratification and assessment on a population. Digging down kind of how the programs are designed. Right now they're kind of breaking into three big categories. Free device programs. So this is an employer that is saying we're going to give everybody in the population a device, or an insurer says every new customer that meets standard underwriting criteria is going to get a device. And the participation rates are pretty high when there's a device in the mix. And we typically are seeing between 70 and 80% customer participation. From an insurer perspective, we're seeing about a 90 to 95% retention rate on individuals that are in that category. The next one, and this one's probably more popular in the United States, is this notion of a subsidized device program. And this is kind of a scenario where, you know, Target makes an announcement saying that they're going to give a discount to every employee that wants to go buy a certain type of device. And so they're subsidizing some of the device cost. And they may have some level of conditions that flip the switch, if you will, from a fully free device to, hey, you're going to have to pay some out of pocket. The employee and customer participation is a little bit lower in subsidized device programs, about 20 to 40%. But fascinatingly, the retention rate is actually a lot higher. So when somebody actually is reaching into their own pocket to help subsidize the cost of the device, their level of engagement with the program we're observing to be significantly higher. And so it's very sticky. And then the last, and I think this one really is the way of the future. It has complexity and challenges today, but is BYOD, or bring your own device models. And so basically what this says is, if you've got a Fitbit that supports heart rate, or if you already own a Garmin, or if you already have an app on your smartphone that you use to record your activity, you can participate in our program. And we really don't care what device you have. You just need to hit the data sharing button and you can participate in the program. And this absolutely is going to be the way these programs are in the future. The technical complexity and challenges with it today is that steps on my Fitbit look different than steps on my Garmin. And steps on my Garmin look different than the steps on my iPhone. And so one of the things that BCA is doing, that we're doing behind the scenes, is we're building a Rosetta Stone that allows us to effectively translate the language that a Fitbit speaks to the language that a Garmin speaks, or the language that an iPhone speaks, so that the employer really doesn't have to be involved in the device process. They can literally just offer the program, their employees can download an app, and they're up and running in a couple of minutes. And behind the scenes, we're doing all the translation and the analytics. The rewards design also kind of fits into three buckets, right? So we're seeing long-term loyalty programs, and so these are programs where you need to demonstrate 3 months to 9 months worth of behavior to earn points, and then if you earn those points, you're going to get some level of longer-term discount. And if I look out 1 to 2 years, where this seems to be headed is this notion of dynamic benefits pricing, where on a monthly or quarterly basis, your benefits will reprice based on the behaviors that you're exhibiting. And that can sound a little scary, I realize that, but there seems to be a level of inertia towards that as I look out 1 to 2 years. What we find, though, is as a consumer goes on a journey towards those longer term rewards, it's hard to maintain motivation. People come out of the gate oftentimes really going strong, and I'm going to make a lifestyle change, and I'm going to, it's almost like a New Year's resolution, right? I'm really hot to trot for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then it kind of starts to wear off when I start to lose momentum. And so this notion of shorter term rewards programs, they're happening on a 1 to 4 week cadence where I can target an individual or a group and reward them with things like a free coffee or a gym membership or a personal trainer if they hit certain levels, where they're much more spot rewards, are emerging as a very important component of these types of programs to help people stay motivated while they work on the bigger prize. And for a certain group of our populations, we see this notion of social programs being really important, where people want to be part of a cause, and so they're linking together with others that have a similar interest and say, together we're going to donate our steps to charity. Together we're going to pool our steps together, and for every 100,000 steps we walk, our organization on our behalf is going to donate a pair of shoes to somebody. Or they're going to donate a gallon of clean water, or they're going to make a financial donation to UNICEF on our behalf. And that does seem to be an important reward scheme for a lot of people in these programs that are looking for much more of an altruistic or social way to contribute. And I think where that looks like in the future is just the ability to participate in more challenges and group contributions to different charities. And so the level of choice there will go up pretty substantially. So, what's next? I think, we're already seeing today that some of these consumer-grade wearables are able to do heart rate monitoring plus or minus 2% when compared to things like an EKG, which is pretty darn accurate for a couple $100 device that you could go into Target or Amazon and buy today. We're seeing sleep cycle monitoring, which is really important with the level of sleep apnea and sleep centers emerging in the United States and other places around the world. Imagine the ability to do that on your wrist every single night within plus or minus 4% accuracy compared to polysomnography, which is kind of the gold standard way of doing that. There are pocket EKGs in the market today. You can literally get a phone case that will measure the sinus rhythm of your heart. And from that, you can determine stress level, you can determine emotion, which is both fascinating and scary. We're getting close to continuous monitoring of arterial blood pressure, respiration rate, and oxygen saturation. There's a ring, literally a ring you wear on your finger that's available late summer that does continuous monitoring of your blood pressure. And that really starts to open up some really interesting engagement programs. The big one that is really kind of, I would say, the holy grail that is kind of missing from the marketplace right now is the ability to do non-invasive blood glucose monitoring. So one of the big areas and use cases is this whole notion of prediabetes. And really the way to get to a prediabetes score is to look at elevated blood glucose levels and insulin levels, and there's just not a good solution that doesn't involve a finger stick today other than an implantable, which most people find a little bit invasive. But I think by late this year there's an organization out of the UK that has one that's based off of radio waves. And we'll see that happen in the next 2 years for sure. From an analytics perspective, the ability to compare someone's calendar age to their actual bio age and fitness level is here today, and it's only going to get better. I think heart rate variability and stress measurements are here today, and they're only going to get better. Pre-hypertensive scores, I think we're right on the cusp of seeing those and pre-diabetes scores emerge. Mental health scores, so we've worked with a number of insurers, and we're now starting to work with some senior care facilities on combining a depression index survey called a PHQ-9, which is kind of a quick 9-question survey that scores the level of depression that an individual has, and overlay that with the data coming off of their Fitbit to look for things like changes in sleep patterns, changes in activity patterns that indicate improving or declining mental health states. when I joked at the beginning about your Fitbit telling on you, I wasn't completely kidding there. So things like binge alcohol behaviors will show up in REM sleep state, as well as elevated heart rate, and those are detectable today, as well as methamphetamine. And we have done some work already in being able to see a change in weight in a participant from their Fitbit without having to reweigh them because of different changes that show up in their biometrics. And so you know, there's a new wave of technology that's not that far out that's pretty interesting. You know, I'm going to go to a last slide here in the deck, which will have my contact information while I pull up a couple of other charts for you to look at, where I'm going to show you some of my own personal data, and then we can kind of jump over to Q&A from there. This is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to Renell, or to shoot me a text or call or email directly, and happy to answer any additional questions offline that you would like if you don't want to ask them in today's conversation. So I'm going to pause on this slide while I pull up a couple of other things for us to take a look at, and I will take everybody off mute, and we can do a little bit of Q&A while I'm pulling up these other slides. Yeah, pause, and I'm going to unmute everyone. So your mics are now open, and if you have questions, feel free to jump in and throw them at me.
JP, this is Ronell. First, I'd like to say that this is the most outstanding webinar that I've watched in a long time. Just forward-thinking, things that I'm not sure that our agents really know about, and I can't wait to share this recording for those that could not be a part of today's webinar. But I had a couple of questions on, number one, what do you think about the Jawbone wearable?
So Jawbone is interesting. So thank you very much, by the way, for your kind comments, and I had hoped that we could find some meaningful information to share with everyone. So I'm glad that you found it helpful. You know, the Jawbone is interesting, right? So the Jawbone Up device was actually rated as one of the top sleep devices out there on the market. The challenge that I think that we're going to see continue in the wearable space is that even though these companies come out with very innovative devices and put in place some very innovative technology, one of the things that they're challenged with is market adoption. And so there are about 5 market leaders out there today: Fitbit, Garmin, Apple, Xenomi, I can never pronounce it exactly right, but a wearable out of China, and then kind of all other. And if you're not one of those market leaders, you're struggling for sales right now. And so Jawbone, I think, is in that category, which puts them at some level of risk of maybe pulling devices out of the market and focusing on health devices. There are some rumors, and I'm that just things I'm hearing, and I would say that's opinion and not anything that's official from Jawbone. But we can absolutely get Jawbone data from Apple Health Kit. But it is a highly rated sleep device. I can definitely say that about it.
Yeah, HAFA has a partnership with Jawbone and have them on our website as a store that individuals can purchase. But I noticed you didn't mention them, and I really haven't had a whole lot of interest. So that's why I was kind of questioning if maybe that direction was a little misdirected on our part. Of course, it doesn't hurt to offer, but that we might need to look to maybe some other wearables that might be more appropriate with the new things that are happening in the market.
Yeah, and I think it's a good device, and like I said, it has very high sleep ratings. It's just the market adoption is something that they are all going to fight for, and if they can't come up with it, then it's going to be challenging for them to to stay
Right.
stay in market.
And the most things that you talked about today, what's connecting your wearable to the employer. So do we foresee our wearable on an individual basis being connected to our physician, where those that maybe are not covered by an employer plan brings in their wearable, it's connected to the doctor's computer, and they can download, the information they need to help us with our health care? Is that something that's in the future?
Well, we're definitely seeing more physician openness to that, and you start to see some great press. Like, there was an article probably 6-8 weeks ago that talked about Fitbit effectively saving somebody's life, and somebody went into the hospital with a rare heart condition, and there were kind of two treatment paths, and the success rate on the two treatment paths were very different. And one of the things that the doctors needed to really know to make an assessment on which treatment path to go down is, was this a relatively recent development, or had it been ongoing for a while? They glance down, they realize that the person's wearing a Fitbit Charge HR. They open up the app on the smartphone, they look at the heart rate data over the last several weeks. From that, they were able to get a feel that it was a relative recent onset of this particular elevated heart rate condition, and they went down a particular treatment path as a result of that. And I think as you start to see more and more of that kind of press hit, you'll see more and more physician openness. And physicians, by necessity, are a little bit skeptical about the accuracy of some of these devices, and they want to see more third-party validation and studies published. And as that starts to happen, I think doctors will become much more open to it as well. Really good question. One of the so I pulled up a slide in the background here. It was one of the ones I was trying to find earlier. So this is me on this left-hand side over here, where what this is doing is this is benchmarking my activity versus a global reference population. And so as I mentioned, my activity has really kind of trended down here over the last 9 or 10 months. But I'm averaging about 4,200 steps a day versus this global reference population that's doing about 6,200 steps a day. And I'm doing about 60 active minutes a day versus 61 as kind of the average. I'm doing a little better on sleep. I'm doing about 7.18 hours of sleep versus the population average of 7. And it goes all the way down to benchmarking my light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep versus the population, as well as my average heart rate and my stress levels and my recovery heart rate score. And so this kind of information, point and click, available to an individual participant, starts to become pretty meaningful on key things that they should go, focus in on. This is another similar view of me from a heart rate perspective here that I'm pulling up now. And so I don't always wear this particular wearable, and so that's why you see some of the bars don't always have data in them. But this view here, I've worn it enough that it's collected. Our system has collected about 1 million heartbeats on me, and what that tells me is this is my typical pattern by heart rate for time of day. And so my lowest heart rate is at about 4 a.m. in the morning. My highest is about 2 in the afternoon, which is fascinating, and I can't give you a really good reason for that other than I'm getting amped up on conference calls and maybe getting a little too excited, and I should take a deep breath every now and then. What's really fascinating is that my heart rate actually starts to come up before I ever wake up in the morning. And so it's almost, there's a physiological response that's starting to happen before I even wake up, where my heart rate's beginning to elevate. And I can, start to look at patterns by time of day and by day of week. And I can do similar things on my own activity levels, where I can look at, my activity patterns by time of day and day of week. In some cases, all the way down to body temperature and perspiration levels. And so it really is a lot of rich information for the individual, a lot of rich information for the employer at an anonymized level. Just imagine, as an employer, the ability to look at your overall population and their average activity levels and average sleep levels, and then be able to, assuming that the population's big enough, be able to look at location A versus location B versus location C, and think about which of the wellness programs is actually generating engagement with the employee base. And so, you know, it's really easy and very point and click now to be able to explore some of that kind of insight. What other questions do you guys have? All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and let us spend a little bit of time with you. I was going to put my my contact information back up on screen here in case you had additional questions. But again, thank you for spending the time with us, and hopefully you found the information helpful. And if there's anything that we can do to answer some additional questions for you, don't be shy about reaching out. Ronell, thank you very much for arranging this and allowing us to participate with you and giving us the opportunity.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure that this recording is put on our resource library, and that my notes, copious notes from this, will be put on our Monday morning news this Monday about this outstanding presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
You too.